Have you ever had to say, I'm too close for missiles, I'm switching to guns, or something similar?
Only in a nightclub to impress somebody. So never in the aircraft, no.
Have you ever sang "You've Got That Love and Feeling" in a nightclub?
Only in the airplane, never in a nightclub.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts, and joined by my co-host, Dr. Scott Melson. Hello, Scott.
What's up, man?
How are you, sir?
I am vacated.
Vacated. You're just back from the Canadian Rockies.
Actually, not the Rockies.
Oh.
Different chain.
Whatever. It's all close.
Mountains, right? But yes,
Rockies Junior.
The mountains of British Columbia.
Rockettes.
No, it's so. Ashley and I had this discussion whilst there. We were in Whistler, and wondering what mountain chain, like what mountains are these? And so it's actually like a whole bunch of different ones because the province of British Columbia is like mostly mountains, and there's like 7 or 8 different chains. The like Banff, where a lot of people are going right now.
Yes.
Banff is very in vogue. So Banff is the Canadian Rockies, but Whistler, which is farther west and very very near the coast, is. It's not the Sierra Nevada, but it would be more kind of like.
Right.
And so, interesting fact, playing it fast and loose with the word interesting, is that all of these mountains that surround Whistler, which is where the 2010 Winter Olympic Games were held, Whistler and Vancouver, are volcanoes. So if you remember learning about the Ring of Fire in 7th grade geography, Whistler sits right smack dab in the middle of the Ring of Fire. None of them have erupted for tens of thousands of years.
Just a matter of time.
But they all could. None of them are extinct.
And once Yellowstone blows, it's just a chain reaction.
Dude.
And the West Coast falls off into the ocean.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I guess I'm not vacated anymore, but I was solid vacated for about a week.
Welcome back.
Thanks, man.
Your pictures were lovely.
I can't wait to go back. We're gonna go back next year, we think.
Man, it's on our list. We may go to somewhere in Canada next year.
Canada's awesome.
Banff is on my list. I don't really care. Toronto's lovely as well.
I've heard Banff is great. I want to make it there at some point, but
Saskatoon
for the nice for the moment at least, my heart belongs to Whistler.
Nice. Are you a backpacker, a camper?
So I love to backpack and camp. I love to hike. Ashley, my lovely wife, who has occasionally made an appearance here on the pod, loves to hike, provided that at the end of it
there's a shower.
There's a shower. And ideally a bottle of wine with a comfortable bed.
Nice.
So,
well, you and I should plan a trip to like the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. You have to do like a lottery thing to get in. I went probably 15 years ago, and it was incredible. Like where you did the portage in and the whole deal, and pack in, pack out. Yeah,
dude, let's do it.
All right,
we did this past our biggest hike we did this time was was to Garibaldi Lake, which is in the Garibaldi Provincial Park. You hike up to it's a huge alpine glacier lake. It was I think for a day hike it's pretty solid. The round trip was 12.5 miles with almost not quite 3,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah,
so it was not easy, but well worth it.
Nice. Also, shout out to local meteorologist Emily Sutton, who just completed a rim-to-rim hike in a single day of the Grand Canyon this week.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was like a 14-hour or something. It was really cool.
That is like incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I mean she's done Ironman and stuff. She was training, but she posted about it, so I was like, that's really awesome.
That's an amazing feat.
Well done, Emily. If you listen to the pod, my mother loves you and reads your blog every day.
And come on the pod and tell us about that, because I have backpacked through the Grand Canyon and cannot imagine going down and out in the same day.
Should be cool. I will reach out and see. We are also joined today. It's not just me and Scott. It's another Scott. Scott Downey. Hello, sir.
Thank you. Hello.
Scott is a friend of mine, a former classmate. We both recently completed our MBAs.
That's right.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
The money's now rolling in.
Congrats to you both.
That's right.
Thank you.
I'm in that weird period where I don't have school, but I don't yet have to start paying on the student loans. So,
God, isn't it awesome?
Just a couple of months before that comes due.
Just like the best 6 months of your postgraduate life.
I actually tried to consolidate and get the ball rolling on that, and I couldn't because I'm still in school status. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just wait longer then. So, Scott, we're going to do this differently than we've done some other guests, where we kind of isolate the guest interview for a separate section, but we really want to have your input and your feedback along the way.
You got it.
So
You're hosting today. You're
that's
one
right.
of the
Yeah,
hosts.
it's actually it's a
We're
third
gonna go a
co-host.
totally different direction then.
That's right. Happy clouds. And so, Scott, I know that you are a retired Navy fighter pilot.
That is correct.
How 20 years?
20 years.
20 years in the Navy. I will say this story that I've shared before in class. In almost every class, we'd go around and everyone introduced themselves, and there'd always be one or two that are like, I'm also a pilot. And Scott would like elbow me, like, all right. And then get to him, and he's like, I'm a 20-year veteran Navy fighter pilot. I've landed however many times off of aircraft carriers and like all this.
F-14, F-18?
F-18.
Nice.
Yeah.
I liked you before, but
What's not to like?
but now I have a little bit of a crush because
It's all I've ever really done.
Yeah.
So it's my whole identity. So when I had to show anybody up.
Explains why you're wearing a flight suit right now.
You guys need to record this
Dude, that's-
video.
dude.
You need to video this thing.
What do you do?
I
That-
look good in a flight suit.
that was the ultimate like I mean, well, it's all I've ever really done. You know, it's just like fly like $100 million aircraft and just like land on a boat.
On a boat. Yeah.
You know, that's
It was the life.
just a job.
Right. Get out and be like, God, just another Monday.
Yeah.
But seriously, our gratitude to you as a veteran.
yeah.
I know you
You're
did
welcome.
some combat in the Middle East.
I did. Yes.
So-
Yeah, it was my pleasure to do all that. I mean, it was. I was pleased to do it. Enjoyed what I did, and yeah, there was tough times, but
Sure. And you are now working for. Are you doing flight instruction now in your new job?
flight instruction will be my new job. Yeah.
For for FedEx, for a parcel carrier.
Right.
Federal Express.
What what
Different
is
kinds
their
of planes.
Yeah, what I was gonna say? What's in their fleet? What's the major what's the majar aircraft in their
They've
fleet?
got 5 aircraft. They've got
AT-AN Warthog.
none of them have guns. I don't understand. I don't carry any bombs, at least not up front. Their pilots fly the Boeing 777, the 767, and the 757. They've got the Airbus 300, and then they've got,
Cargo versions of all these, obviously.
of course, yeah. And then they got the MD-10 and MD-11, I believe.
right,
so 5 or 6 fleet aircraft.
Nice.
Got-
So you're moving to. Is there headquarters in Memphis?
Their headquarters, they run that town, yeah.
Interesting.
FedEx Arena downtown, man.
I've,
where the,
I've been through Memphis, but that was probably 15 years ago.
Where the
And I was-
Grizzlies play.
I
That's
forget
right.
those exist.
That's right. There's a FedEx field, but I think it's in DC.
Yeah, it could be
I never really understood that. I guess they wanted a higher profile location for
federal.
Oh,
Look at us.
I get it.
Ship all your federal documents with us. Excellent. So, well, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
At some
Pleased to
point
be here.
during the episode, I'm going to have to devise. I may just do last names here, so our listeners who may not be familiar with our voices will know Scott 1 from Scott 2. So I may just do Melson and Downey.
That's fine. I've been called
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
I will admit that Downey suggested better Scott, or good Scott, bad Scott, and something else.
Correct and incorrect.
Correct.
I'm gonna throw out there
Correct Scott. Incorrect Scott.
question of the week: who's good Scott and who's better Scott?
Ooh, let's save it for the end. We'll come back to it. I was trying to find a drum roll sound effect, but I didn't get there.
No, don't do that. Because then they'll pick him,
They might pick him.
and I might cry.
Well, they don't gots to know.
I don't need it. You can call me Bad Scott. That's fine.
What's your middle name, Melson?
Christopher.
That's right. You're not a Christopher to me.
What was when you retired? What did you retire as?
Sorry, I almost said Colonel. That's the wrong service. I
Yeah.
was a commander.
Oh, that
About-
works. Commander.
Scott and Commander Scott.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
that works.
Call me Commander.
Master and Commander. All right. Well, Dr. Melson, I'm just Doctor and Commander. Man, I feel
I
like
like
the
that.
lowly man here. Just
Civilian.
Just civilian, right? Plebeian Andy. Let's get into our first segment. Our don't miss this. You've got a few notes, a few things we should stay abreast of.
Yeah. So we've got our regular news roundup this week, but a couple of quick breaking news that we wanted to just throw out there. Developments for you guys to stay aware of. So for anyone that is interested in the ongoing marijuana saga, the aftermath of State Question 78 here in Oklahoma. The Marijuana Working Group, the bipartisan legislative group that's kind of helping the healthcare authority and overseeing them as they draft rules, they met today. We're not going to go through everything they talked about. Most of the discussion centered around testing the products that will be sold by dispensaries.
Right.
If you want to get all the details on that, Catherine Sweeney from the Journal Record has all of the details on her Twitter feed. She was there and keeping everybody updated throughout the feed. Throughout the meeting. I will also say, if you don't already follow Catherine on Twitter, you're doing Twitter wrong. So
that's true. She's a great resource.
Yeah, so follow Catherine regardless.
I will just a note about the medical marijuana working group. They are looking at drafting legislation to add to the rules that were passed by the healthcare authority and by the health department. Not the healthcare authority, the health department. And Bud Scott from the medical marijuana industry, I guess it said the other day, he tweeted out that Oklahoma is going to be leading the pack in like dark marijuana production or something. Like basically the rules we passed aren't adequate. We need some like stronger legislation around it, which is why this is still a big issue. And I think we are probably, in the public's opinion, I would say we're in this like middle ground where we've got medical marijuana. A bunch of folks wanted recreational. That didn't work out. And so now like, it's maybe we're in a spot where we have to either be responsible with it, or we've got to like be blatantly irresponsible and just let it be recreational, right? Like those.
I think that's a really an accurate characterization because
you don't want to have rules that you don't enforce,
right? And what we're still dealing with, I think a lot of this is, I think some of the folks that were really kind of pushing this are reconciling with the fact that they want, like, we passed medical marijuana and there's a reluctance to treat it like a medicine.
Right.
And
it's an herb.
Yeah. Like if we're like, and that's the thing, like, people are like, well, you don't have to do this for alcohol. You don't have to do this for, cigarette. You don't have to do this for whatever. Well, those aren't medicines, right? Like, we didn't pass recreational marijuana. We passed medicinal marijuana. And so I think as a doctor, it's incumbent upon, the health department and the legislature to treat it like a medicine. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the rules that, the health department originally passed are appropriate. And, I understand why people were upset about some of them. But the idea that this shouldn't be, like, regulated at all is an oversimplification.
Right. I mean, you voted for it to be regulated.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there people actually trying to get less regulation out of the rules, or are they trying to tighten them up?
Well, so they passed some rules.
I read them,
but
I don't have anything to compare them to.
Right. I mean, we're the 31st state, something that's
right
legalized this. 35th or 36th, I think.
Okay, we're whatever.
Most of the country.
Yeah. And so I think we've learned some lessons from other states like Colorado. But a bunch of groups submitted different rules, and they kind of used some of those and kind of made up their own. And I'm not sure what Bud wants to be specific. I know it was like a 600-page booklet of rules that's probably useful, but also, I don't know, shouldn't it to be prudent somewhere to be like,
yeah,
okay, you get 2 ounces, like smoke them if you got them, and
right.
Don't sell it.
Right.
But I understand that we need more.
You guys stretch that out to 600 pages.
Right. I mean, it's just like a paper in grad school. But I mean, you've got to have some kind of testing standards to make sure that what people are buying is legitimate and it can be measured, because everyone knows that like the weed we get today is not the weed that our parents got back then. And so how do you compare one to another and all that stuff?
Yeah.
So anyway.
That was kind of the first on our new breaking news update. Next, there was an announcement today that Senator James Inhofe, senator from Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe, will now be chairing the Senate Armed Services Committee. That is a post that was previously held by the late Senator John McCain.
Okay.
Yeah, so the post was open. He was voted on today. He will be chairing Senate Armed Services. I think that that's good for a couple of reasons. Number one, that's a very important position. It's a very powerful position, and it's good when your home state senator holds that post, particularly when your home state has multiple military bases.
Right. Yeah.
So as the military is continuing to modernize and at times restructuring, and when contracts are renewed, and it is only good news for Oklahoma that one of our senators is in charge of the Senate committee that kind of oversees that process. When you consider how many bases we have here in the state and how many active and reserve personnel we have, to say nothing of civilian support staff. The other reason that it's good is because I think, now I could be wrong, yell at me on Twitter if I'm wrong, if he chairs Senate Armed Services, I don't believe that he can also chair the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, which to me, to not have someone who held a snowball on the floor of the Senate and said, see, global warming doesn't exist, to not have that person in charge of the Environmental Committee can only be a good thing.
He also authored some books, one of which was called How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future.
Yeah.
And the greatest hoax.
So I think...
so you feel like he's maybe not fit to chair something related to environment when he's so blatantly predisposed?
Yes, to not believe people who are experts on the environment. So
I would say that he's not a scientist.
Yeah.
He is 83 years old. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
He's not a young man.
I'm not saying it's bad, but and it's also a chance that he will not be in this post for very long.
Ageist.
Well, and because I mean, there's
Realist.
a lot of realists. Thank you, Commander Downey.
Sorry.
There's a
83
lot
years
of
old.
Why do you hate elderly people?
no. That's I don't. I love my grandmother. But I mean, there's a lot of buzz here locally, especially about Senator Inhofe's retirement impending, perhaps in 2020.
Although he has not commented on that.
Of course not.
Yeah.
He's just gonna keep it on. Vote, 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 die.
So that's that. Next up, this is really important, particularly if you live south of the metro. So there was a meeting this evening of the Pauls Valley Hospital Authority, had an emergency meeting tonight, looking at the possibility that the Pauls Valley Hospital may close. The meeting has since adjourned. They convened, essentially went immediately into executive session, came out not that long later. I think it was within about 30, 45 minutes to say that they are not going to close tomorrow. They don't have plans to close imminently, but they are still really kind of on the border in terms of their operations. This would be, for the Pauls Valley Hospital to close would be absolutely devastating. It would mean that residents that currently now depend on the hospital for emergency care and the subspecialty care that's available there would now be looking at hospitals that are 25, 30 miles farther away. And if you are having a heart attack or an asthma attack or another life-threatening,
You sliced your finger open.
medical condition, you don't want to have to drive an extra 20 miles to get to the hospital, and the ambulance doesn't want to have to drive an extra 20 miles to get you there. So this is notable for that reason. It's also a lot of hospitals in rural Oklahoma and rural America generally, but especially Oklahoma, are in danger of closing, and one of the main reasons are the cuts to Medicare that we've seen over and over and over and over again. Those don't just, they affect the patients, obviously, but they affect patient access to care because hospitals, nursing homes, doctors' offices who see majority Medicaid populations literally can't keep their doors open when those rates are slashed to the degree that they have been. So
sorry, this reminds me, did you see the story yesterday? I think I saw David Blatt share it on Facebook, actually, from OK Policy, that there may be a Medicaid provider rate increase.
Yes.
But the way the article was written, it was like trying to blast them they're gonna face an increase from 3% to 4%, and it's like, wait, hang on, that's a good thing. Yeah. But it was written with the same tone that they've been writing all the articles about Medicaid provider rate decreases, and it's like, and David was kind of like, I didn't expect deep policy analysis from these outfits, but this is kind of egregious that they totally blew it. So, so hey, good news for medical providers like you, Dr. Nelson.
Yeah. So,
and maybe for the hospital here.
Yes. So check out Twitter. You can see about the Pauls Valley Hospital Authority if you'd like to know more about that. So that's it for breaking news, and now we'll get into our regularly scheduled.
All right, let's get into our news roundup.
So we are starting with a I'll call it a blog post because I don't really have anything else to call it. This is from Representative Marcus McIntyre, Republican from Duncan.
Shout out to Duncan.
Yeah, from marcusmcintyre.com. So Representative McIntyre has a piece that he published today that's called what voters, what Oklahomans are telling their legislators. And really the crux of the piece, the main thrust of it, is talking about House Bill 1010XX and what he sees as kind of the ramifications of that bill passing, what the ramifications were on the elections that we just had, certainly last week, but also in June. So if you'll recall, House Bill 1010XX was the bill that was passed in the second extraordinary session of the 56th legislature, that increased taxes on the gross production tax, fuel, cigarettes, little cigars. It's the revenue bill, the bill that funded the teacher pay raise.
Cigarillos.
And Representative McIntyre talks about how, what he was hearing when he was running for election last time was two things: fix the budget hole, fix the pay rate, and give teachers a raise. And House Bill 1010XX did both of those things. And in large measure, legislators who supported it are going to be, if they were running, folks who supported it will be in the office again, presumably next year, or at least on the ballot in November.
Right.
But most people who voted against it either retired, were term limited, or didn't make it out of their race in June, and if they did, they got defeated last week in the runoff.
So I think 10 of the people, 10 of the 13 or 16.
Yeah. So there was, I believe, 19 people who were no votes on House Bill 1010X. Of the 19 who cast no votes, there were 7 representatives. This was in the House, not the Senate.
Right.
Of the 19 people who voted against it, 7 of them were termed out or resigned. 2 of them lost in their primaries, and 6 of them lost in their runoff.
Which is, and so they basically they've all lost, either left or lost to other Republicans, many of whom have run on a pro-education platform so far.
Yep.
And I think this, this kind of gets into our discussion about election results, but this resonates that education is the hot button issue of 2018. Yeah. And it hasn't really died off that much since like the walkout.
No, not at all.
I want to come back to the walkout because Commander Downey and I have had several discussions about that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So check that out, marcusmcintyre.com. We'll throw the link up on the blog and see what Representative McIntyre, who I would say friend of the pod, he's been on the show.
Has he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we did. We interviewed him at the Capitol.
Yeah.
And we've got some other things planned with him down the road.
Yeah, good dude. So check out what he has to say. Next up, we have
an article from the Oklahoman from newsok.com entitled "State Office Independence Running as a Team on Open Government." And really, the headline kind of tells the story that there are independent candidates for most of the statewide offices: treasurer, lieutenant governor, several other things. And they're basically like, hey, we all kind of have the same platform. Let's kind of run as a ticket, right? And I think this is brilliant for just from a strategic standpoint, that if you have similar platforms and you all are kind of this minority group, then why not kind of combine forces? And they said hey, I don't have enough money to send flyers all over the state, but if we all kind of pool our money and make a flyer with all of us and then put it out, then it's really us as kind of getting out there. And this is exciting for me. As someone, I will admit, I'm registered as an independent currently. We were talking before we started recording that I was registered as a Republican for 10 years, as a Democrat for 10 years, and now I'm an independent. Maybe libertarians next. Who knows? We'll see.
Green Party.
Check back in 10 years. And but I think I know a lot of folks that have switched from one of the two major parties to independent, and we've seen their registration numbers grow at a higher pace than either of the major parties. And so I haven't had a chance to assess if I view any of these candidates as the best candidate for office, but I like that they're talking to one another, being like, hey, you know what? Let's give the people of Oklahoma another option, and how can we strategize the best way to do that? So that's what the article is. You can learn a little bit about each of the candidates in there and their strategy if you read it. Thoughts from either one of you guys?
It really starts to make the policies more important. the party, and I think that's probably what resonated. If anything, if it does nothing else, it'll certainly probably increase voter turnout.
Right.
Because they get to stop worrying about this partisan back and forth necessary. And granted, they're probably all Republicans. I don't know, but it doesn't highlight that part of it. It highlights the policy, which is great.
And it's interesting
That's what it's about.
Right. Well, and every candidate's like, I want to have a policy-driven campaign, and then they get in like,
Sure,
this guy's got smelly feet, and so but to have a chance to open it up, right? Like, not that we're ever going to be in a position in the near future to have to establish a what do they do in England? They have to
a new government.
Yeah, but the coalition.
Yeah.
Like where we don't have enough candidates of like a third party where they've got to like figure things out, but that would change the dynamics quite a bit, right?
Definitely.
Because I think in a state like Oklahoma, I think people assume that most independents are like left leaning, but they might only assume that because the Democrats have allowed independents to vote in their primaries and Republicans have not, and so it like makes them just on paper like makes them feel more left leaning, but that is a creation by the parties, not by the independents themselves.
Right.
I know most people I know that have switched to independent in the last couple of years were Republicans that left their party for independent. And then when they found out they couldn't vote in the Republican primaries, they got more pissed, and they may have kind of been driven towards the left for that reason. And I really think like if the Republicans open up their primaries too, we might see this gravitation towards the middle. And I get why they don't, because they need people kind of in their camps. But I like the idea that we get choice.
Agreed. Definitely.
I have some thoughts.
Yes, please.
I'm going to save them for later in the show because we're going to talk about the runoff and the election recap. But I thought part of that discussion might be what happens next. What's in the future?
What's next?
What do the runoff results mean for November?
That works.
So I'm going to save my thoughts about this article and all of the things that you guys just said, and we'll come back to it.
All right.
Reasonable?
Yes.
What's our next article here?
Up next, we have the education funding remains a contentious debate from the Journal Record.
Yes. So from our friends at the Journal Record, who, as you guys know, we're big fans of here on the show, I subscribe. I recommend you subscribe. It's just absolutely fantastic reporting on government business and kind of what's happening in the state. They've got a nice piece talking about, really, it's a similar thread, how, that just because the walkout ended and teachers got a pay raise and education funding got a boost, that does not mean this issue is over. There is a state question that will be on the ballot. I cannot remember the number offhand. There's a state question that will be on the ballot in the fall talking about whether or not property taxes, local district property taxes, can be used to fund things other than buildings, which is kind of what it's relegated to now, right?
Right.
The article delves into a very, very bird's eye view of how education is funded in Oklahoma, which is essentially a mix of state funding and local funding. There's a formula that determines kind of like what state funding for education should be per pupil. Then it looks at each community. It figures out what that individual community's contribution will be based on local ad valorem taxes. It subtracts that and does some other kind of fancy math that determines how much state aid goes to each individual district, with the goal of having roughly equal per student funding across the state. There are some districts like Western Oklahoma that get no state aid because they have so much ad valorem revenue from like wind turbines that they don't get any state aid at all. There are some districts that don't have much ad valorem revenue at all that are largely dependent on the state formula to get funding for their schools. It's a nice article that just kind of looks at this debate. They talked to Jonathan Small, who's the president of the Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs, which is a I don't think it would be inaccurate to say a very, very conservative, maybe even kind of far right local think tank. Is that fair?
Yeah.
They're kind of pushing this, saying that you should maybe not get rid of the state funding formula entirely, but pushing for a funding mechanism of public schools that is based much, much heavier on ad valorem taxes instead of aid from the state. So they talk to Jonathan and kind of get his thoughts why he feels that way. I for the record, speaking for myself, think that he's totally wrong.
Rich get richer, man.
Right. So,
can we pause here and discuss education for a minute? Because we've kind of touched on it a couple of times. And I think why not? I'm going to get Mr. Downey's opinion here.
Let's do it.
Before I go on, and what was the name of the think tank?
OCPA, Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs.
Did they describe the impact that's going to have? I mean, it's pretty difficult to change directions like this.
Yeah. So their thought is that right now, you are limited as a public school district in what you can use ad valorem tax revenue for, right? So you can't pay salaries, right? You can't use it to like fund new staff. You really can just use it for new buildings and I think maintenance of existing buildings. Yep. Okay.
So let's talk about, it's basically property taxes paying for property.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And their argument is by limiting how you can use those funds, you are effectively disincentivizing local communities to make further investment. Now, my counterpoint would be that when you look at the counties, districts that have the highest ad valorem revenue, you get the counties, the districts in West Oklahoma, then you have Broken Arrow, Jenks, Edmond, Norman, the usual suspects. There's no evidence that bears out at all. To me, it's bad policy because it's going to simply continue this divide where areas that are already doing real well will continue to do really, really well. And when you take the state formula away, there's no equalizer, right? There's no way for districts that are behind because property values, instead of averaging $79,000 per pupil the way they do in Edmond, average $35,000 the way that they do in Middell. There's no way to catch up.
And they've got no method of making that gap up.
Right. So that's the argument kind of for and against.
I don't think that's going to fly in this current environment. And I'm speaking as a conservative. I mean, that's just not going to work.
It seems so clear.
I don't understand it. If you've got a method to make up that difference, then let's hear it. But if you don't, I don't think you can change this horse midstream.
Well, I think what you're hinting on is, and I don't want to speak for you, so if I'm getting it wrong, jump in and tell me I'm getting it wrong. But I think that the debate is even more fundamental than that, right? You seem to be coming from a position of thinking there needs to be a way to make up that gap.
Definitely.
And I think that there is an argument being made by people that are kind of much further towards one end of the spectrum that no, there doesn't. There's that we don't have an obligation as a state, or at least the government doesn't have an obligation to make sure that every kid in Oklahoma has as much as possible equal opportunity to a quality education. And so if you don't believe that, then there's no reason to have a way to make up that gap.
They don't have an obligation if they've got a commitment to making those areas, Ada, Oklahoma, or just some small. If they've got a commitment to making it economically viable for new businesses, new people coming in, to pay those property taxes and watch property taxes increase, revenue increase, to help fund those areas specifically earmarked for those areas. But otherwise, people are just going to flee.
Well, and
it's.
It kind of makes. This is the reason that income taxes or something that's across the board helps equalize things, right? Is that everybody pays into this?
It's supposed to,
right? Yeah. And then you kind of disperse it evenly or adjusted for other factors so that a rising tide raises all ships,
right?
And taking that tide away, some ships are going to sink.
This is state government that should be looking out for the entire state, not just portions of the entire state. And it's I just
no argument for me.
I don't like it,
right?
Because otherwise, 10 years from now, like you and I have talked about, we're gonna have another walkout. We're gonna have an underfunded education for half the schools in the state, old textbooks, whatever the cause célèbre is. We're going to see it again, and it's going to be here when people start thinking that No, the state has no obligation to help make up any differences.
Right. So, Commander Downey, your daughter's high school
I've
age?
still got 2 in high school. Yeah.
Okay. That's a big move for them in high school. Moving.
Yeah.
Sure, that's
Actually, they're okay with it. They're not ready to slit my throat. I'm not sleeping with one eye open. So,
right.
yeah.
Right. Well, but so have you lived in Edmond the whole time?
Ever since I've moved here. To
Okay,
Oklahoma,
so your kids have grown up in the Edmond school
Yes.
system, and which is, I think, everyone kind of empirically somehow knows, like a priori knowledge that like Edmond schools are some of the best schools here in the metro.
Yeah.
Shout out to my alma mater, Edmond Memorial High School, recently ranked by MSN as the best public high school in the state.
Yeah, go Bulldogs.
That's right.
And so
Impressed you knew that.
we have my
Bulldogs. They're all dogs up there.
It's true.
Huskies,
Huskies.
Bulldogs, and what are the other ones? We just played Santa
The
Fe.
Wolves.
The Wolves, that's right.
just kind of dogs. And how have you seen? All right, have you seen schools change over the last like 10 years?
It's a little bit. For instance, right now, the kids are at Edmond North.
Mm-hmm.
They just completed their brand new local stadium.
Oh, right, yeah.
All the Edmond schools used to play their home football, and I'm speaking about it, football as if it's the biggest sport participation-wise, or whatever the case may be. But it's just an example. So now all the schools are getting their own stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
And I just drove to Tecumseh a couple weeks ago, and I happened to go by. Is it called Tecumseh High School?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so this is where I look at situations like this, where state reps or even council members or people would sit and say, "Why does a school like that? They've got their own stadium. All these Edmond schools should." But you look at the rest of the facilities, and we're just talking about buildings here. It's a very nice schools up there in Edmond, and they're not everywhere else. I haven't seen changes other than just this massive influx of cash. There's an entire drama auditorium at Edmond North that, granted, that was there when we moved. I just don't know of other places that have the kind of facilities. It's a small
Because they don't
college.
have the ad valorem tax revenue to pay
and
for
that's
Mm-hmm.
and so there is a part of me that says, don't deny that, but there's got to be a way to get, and I won't downplay the benefit of having those kinds of facilities, but it's got to be across the state. We want our rural Oklahoma students to get the same kind of education because they're going to contribute to Oklahoma
Right.
in the future. And it's almost like limiting the pool of future leaders and doctors or whatever you want here in Oklahoma.
F-18 pilots.
Or F-18 pilots,
Right.
that's right. I just, and it's only since you and I started talking about this for about the last year that I've become a little more passionate about it, that I just have a broader view than just my own locale. And it's a little frustrating.
And I on a personal note, I certainly applaud that because not everybody does,
Right.
like
you can get blinders and, real looking through a soda straw.
Right, we all want the best for our kids.
Sure.
I think most of our listeners know, like, I'm divorced. My kids live in Edmond and they go to school up there, and I happen to live right now in a district for Cleveland Elementary, which is an excellent elementary school in Oklahoma City schools. Now the junior high and high school are not stellar right now in that area, and so my kids they're going to stay where they're at because that's the best thing for them in lots of ways. But I definitely feel like fortunate that they get to, but I do feel like bad for my neighbors who are my friends whose kids are transitioning to middle school and they're like looking to move because they're like, yeah, but this middle school is not great, and what do we do that's the best for our kids, and starting to think about the next generation.
And I think that hits on something that's really tough. And this is, I'm the guy at the table with no kids, right? So
You should get some.
But one of the things that's hard, and it's really easy when it's not your kid, right, is like, well, if all of those parents, right, if you're concerned enough to move because you're worried about where your kids are going to go to middle school, those are the kind of parents that have the ability to change that middle school if their kids go there.
Right.
But right now, everyone is worried that their kids are going to be the only ones, and so they leave. And when they leave, their resources leave with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there's less competition for the housing market, like in that school district, which means that property values don't go up as fast, which means that ad valorem tax revenue is not what it needs to be, which means those schools still struggle to compete.
It's a very myopic view.
Well, and I think, Commander Downey, what you said about driving to Tecumseh, where you got the opportunity to see another school and what it looked like, and I would love to see someone launch an Instagram account where they post photos just of the outside of schools across the state,
right.
and you will see a wide range of what that looks like, and that would give a face to some of these discussions about 4-day school weeks and school consolidation and ad valorem taxes and all this stuff relates to be like, let's lay eyes on these schools, because the people that are voting for this at the state capitol don't necessarily know what these schools look like, right?
Yeah.
You go to Western Heights schools and see what they look like with like broken windows and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And then go to Edmond North, right? Or Edmond Memorial, and then go to like Broken Arrow, and then go to Godebo or Idabel, something like that. And like, let's compare apples to apples here.
Yeah.
And see, are our children, and when I say our children, I mean the state of Oklahoma, not just my children, are our children as a state getting the best education that they can? Are they getting what we believe they deserve? And I think it takes more people having an outlook that we're all in this together.
If you don't take a view of looking a few dominoes down the road, you don't get the right, I think, to complain about I don't know. I'll just pick some how much state funding is supplementing unemployment. Let's say unemployment insurance. If you haven't done something or supported something that helps reduce the number of people who might have to use such a thing further down the road, and again, there's a very broad brush I just painted there, but I think that's the way parents need to look at it. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to live where I live, and my kids get to go to one of the best school districts in the state. But if they stay here, or I have a daughter who's staying here. She's going to Oklahoma City University. If she stays here and her taxes, she moves to a house, her taxes, less of her tax revenue is going to go to support, say, a local high school, and have to go support Medicaid rolls or something like that, or unemployment insurance, things that we could have reduced if we made sure that elementary schools and middle schools around this state, that these students are getting an education that prevents them from getting to that point. Right. 12 years down the road, or 15 years down the road.
And that's one of the dilemmas that legislators face, and it's tough, right? Because if you're running for public office, right, you are, by definition, you're trying to win a popularity contest, right? Like,
right.
And good, bad, or indifferent, at some level, you are trying to convince a group of people of something.
A local group of people.
Right. And you're trying to convince people, and most of whom are not millionaires and billionaires, right? You're trying to convince them that the increased taxes that are required to pay for this now are going to benefit everybody else in 20 years.
Right.
And I get that when you have to get elected every 2 years, that is a hard argument to make, but it is, in my opinion, the moral and just from a policy standpoint, correct argument to make.
Well, and I will say, I think that the teacher walkout gets to this because the thing that was successful at the walkout, and I get that nothing happened after the walkout, like everything happened beforehand, but the fact that the walkout occurred, and it wasn't just poor districts, it wasn't just rich districts, it was across the state, like hundreds of districts showing up, people marching from Tulsa down the turnpike. And you can give anecdotal stories on both sides of this, but like the fact is 30,000 people walked out of their jobs and came down to the Capitol and stayed there for a week and a half. and said this matters to the entire state. And what used to happen, you hear the cicadas in the background?
They're back.
Shout out to listener and friend of the pod, Effie Craven.
Don't just call her a
She's
listener.
Founding board member.
Thank you. Not even just friend of the pod. Like, beloved friend and former Oklahoman, Effie Craven, who specifically texted us today and was like, you can hear the cicadas throughout the entire
cicadas are
episode.
insane.
Despite living in D.C., she is still a loyal weekly pod
make her
listener.
homesick.
She is. It does make her homesick. It does. We text daily, I think. So, but yeah, I think that the key to success is that it was all of us saying this matters to all of us, right? Like, and if we do that about not just education but other issues, hey, we might fix a few things around here.
If local wealthy or local wealthy district representatives aren't communicating to their constituents that allowing for I don't even know what the amount is. I'll just make the 0.5% increase or 1.5%, whatever it is, will prevent
in income taxes or which taxes?
In property taxes
Yeah.
might do well to prevent a 4% increase in state income taxes 12 years from now. Do it now. It benefits people personally and it benefits people locally, economically.
So I would
they
actually
just may not see it right away. So sorry.
I would push back on you a little bit and say that I think that the increased revenue actually needs to come from income taxes. And the reason is because and the reason I say that specifically is because let's say that every district in the state increased ad valorem taxes by 0.5%. Well, 0.5% increase in ad valorem taxes in Edmond makes a much bigger difference than a 0.5% ad valorem tax in a district where the average property value is significantly less than that. So if we're really trying to decrease this disparity, what needs to happen is increase something like income taxes across the board where
so there's more in general revenue.
Yeah, there's more in GR. So that, and this is not a popular thing to say, but so that the increased revenue, the increased funding may not go to the places where the funding is coming from.
So that's a funny thing, and this goes back to what we were saying, is that the benefit of taxation, like the purpose of it, is to spread out the revenue so that everyone benefits. Again, a rising tide raises all ships. But especially in Oklahoma, like, we have this perspective that we don't want to pay for those people, right? Like, we don't want to. I live in Edmond. I don't want to give money to someone in Godibo. They can do their own schools, and it's this. Having just read that Boomtown book, like, it still makes me think of like the early days of Oklahoma, which aren't that long ago, about how it was like, this is my land, get the hell off, and you're responsible for your life, I'm responsible for mine, and there hasn't always been this reciprocal relationship. But when Oklahoma is at its best, right, it's often at our worst. It's things like April 15th. It's things like May 3rd. When all that stuff doesn't matter, and we
Just April 19th.
What did I say? 15th?
15th.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking 95. Yes, April 19th.
You
Tax
said
day.
tax day, not bombing day.
Whoopsie daisy. Yes, bombing day. So the memorial, April 19th, like May 3rd. It's those events where we put aside our geographical boundaries or our socioeconomic boundaries, and we say the Oklahoma standard is that all people are in this together, and that phrase gets invoked in all kinds of weird situations, but this is what it's about.
Yeah. That was I didn't mean to specify just ad valorem.
you're fine.
It was more of a, can we get some local politicians? And I talked to you, and I won't even mention some of their names, but I've talked to several on my couch. I'm just hoping for a communicator who can spread this message. You can't be in a wealthy district and not ask something. I'm all for personal responsibility, but we have an opportunity in wealthy districts to make this a great state, not just make it a great municipal location.
You're 100% right, and I also think that even because I think one thing that gets missed a lot of times in this debate, and it's great to talk to someone like you who has a more conservative approach to this than someone like me. I think one of the things that gets lost in this debate is that people I think a lot of times the debate, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, whatever, personal responsibility versus like the government should take care of everybody. And I would actually say that the difference is not that. I absolutely believe in personal responsibility, but I think that what we have to do as a society and as a political system is acknowledge that folks who are destitute, or not even destitute, folks who are living maybe not at poverty but near poverty, right? Folks who experience food and housing insecurity, even if they're not homeless and starving, they're not necessarily there because they've made bad choices, right? Maybe they are, but there's a whole lot of them who aren't, who are doing everything they can to take personal responsibility, and they need some help. And I want to be clear. I'm not trying to say that you personally would disagree with that. I just think that the debate tends to break down, like Andy said, well, we don't want to help those people because there is a perception that there's us, hardworking, tax-paying Oklahomans, and then there's some people who aren't, when the reality is the vast majority of us are hardworking, tax-paying Oklahomans, whether you make $15,000 a year, $50,000 a year, or $150,000 a year.
Absolutely. And even if there are those people who got that way because of their bad choices, we don't want more of them. We don't want their children. We want to give them an avenue away from that. And
Preach.
I won't name the school, but we do some volunteer work at a local elementary school in a very rough area, a very impoverished area of Oklahoma City here, and they love us coming. We just read with them. We read to them. We help them. It basically revolves around reading, but it's something that small. It gives these kids an excitement to actually come to school. Then what would maybe new floors do, or new books, or and again, just like Scott said, most of the parents are near poverty. Some of their parents are just working 3 jobs and can't do this. Some of their parents are, substance abuse, and it's just bad situations. But we've got to break that cycle. If you don't break that cycle, you're going to be state revenue is going to be taking care of these kids 20 years from now.
Yep.
And so it's almost a selfish step to take to help them now. To really make education top notch.
It's a good investment.
It is a great investment, and I would rather pay for it now than watch what it does to the state welfare rolls or homeless population 20 years from now. And again, it's broad brush time, and I don't mean to paint it too bleakly, but we have an opportunity, I think, especially some of these wealthy districts. And I just sat the other night in the first home game at Edmond North High School. It's a beautiful stadium, and I don't begrudge them having it. But it came just a couple weeks after I just did a quick tour there of just a few miles east of here. And it's quite a difference.
Yeah.
It's quite a difference.
Well, I will say, like, we've used the word investment several times in this conversation, and so I quickly Googled the definition because I had a hunch that there's something that resonates there, and indeed there is.
Webster's Dictionary defines investment as...
Because, yes,
It's a great podcast.
an act of devoting time, effort, or energy to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. A worthwhile result. That's the part that hits me where I'm like, that's exactly what you're saying, Commander Downey. Like, that's that what we do now, our time, our money, our effort, putting in results in something that is worthwhile. And I'll be damned if Oklahoma is not like compelled to do things that are worthwhile.
The complaint you hear is people who say, just like you said, Scott, that or maybe that was you, Andy, who said, it's not my problem. I don't want to take care of it. Well, you're taking care of it whether you want to or not.
Right.
If you really don't want to take care of it, then invest in it now.
Right.
Then don't fight a slight increase in state income tax or whatever it is that's funding better teachers or more programs for these kids.
I would even say better teachers. I would say more teachers.
That is kind of disparaging towards teachers. I did not mean that.
Sorry,
I love teachers.
Shout out to all the teachers who listen. We know you do a great job.
Go across the street and get Sherry.
That's all, folks. I'm out.
It's not better teachers. It's more teachers.
You can edit that out, right?
Well, honestly, let's be clear that already this year we've approved more emergency certifications than we did last year, which was more than the year before that, and that was more than yet again, historic levels of alternate certifications. And I'm not saying that all alternately certified teachers are unqualified. I'm saying they were alternately certified. These are folks who didn't necessarily go into teaching for the intent of teaching. By and large, there are some excellent teachers, right? Like you and I could both go. I think we'd be qualified to teach something.
Well, I've actually thought about it. I've thought about going. Like, obviously, I have a full-time job, but like, I've thought about going and getting my like alternate certification, just because I'm curious, like, what's involved.
What's involved?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it worked. Like, can I just go say like, hey, I have a medical degree, right? I'm an MD, so. Does that mean I'm like automatically certified to teach?
No, you take a test.
High school biology or chemistry or anatomy or physiology or whatever it is. Like I don't know how it works. Like what is the alternate certification process? Like I have no idea how that process works.
I thought about doing it too. The hard part is that I'm afraid if I did it, then I would feel compelled to do it. And
then you get called all the time. Like, hey, can you do this? And I'm like, no, I cannot.
Can't take the pay cut. Right. There's probably some rule against that.
Also, this has been I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
This is a fantastic conversation, but I think if we keep going at this rate, we're going to have the longest podcast we've ever had.
We're going
to bump up podcast.
Bump against
nice.
Commander Downey's been excited about this for a while, and he's been saying this is your best episode ever.
It's been solid so far. We'll let the listeners can tell us. We'll let the downloads. Should we keep going with our news roundup and kind of get through that and get to elections?
Let's run through these so we can get to that last one.
Some special music. That's right. So next up we got article from Oklahoma Policy Institute. It's a blog post by Philip Rocco, who is a professor of political science. Oklahoma's plan for Medicaid work requirements is a dangerous experiment that will put the health of thousands of Oklahomans at risk. It's a long title, but it's worthwhile. Check this out. So there's been a lot of talk about work requirements. It wasn't in this week, so we didn't put it in the list. You may or may not have seen that yours truly had an op-ed in the Oklahoman last week.
That's right, you did.
I did. It's true. So
that should be on the list.
That was it was published. So it's funny because they didn't. I'm not trying to like disparage it. They didn't actually tell me that they'd accepted it. So I found out that it got published when people started. Yeah. And so it was published not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. My op-ed kind of focuses on the work requirements and basically talking about why I feel like they are bad policy in terms of decreasing access, and that I kind of go after the governor and the legislature a little bit in terms of I feel like using some bad data and some bad presuppositions in terms of passing this requirement that OHCA develop a proposal for work requirements. Dr. Rocco goes after. He doesn't go after OHCA because he does kind of predicate his argument by stating they're put in an impossible position of defending something for which there is not good data. But he kind of breaks down the OHCA proposal for work requirements and kind of looks at several of the studies that they cite in their waiver proposal and says, here's why they're using the data either incorrectly or like misrepresenting it. So if you're curious about the work requirements, which you should be, and if you think it's bad policy, which it is, you can check out my op-ed in News OK from a week ago, and then you can check out Dr. Rocco's blog post on OK Policy and kind of get two different angles about why this is bad policy.
Right, and we will link to both of those on the blog post for this Let's Fix This OK.org/blog. And I just pulled up your op-ed to put on there. Also, did you see that the president tweeted about work requirements for SNAP today, which is a whole separate issue? Listen,
I don't actually follow him on Twitter.
I don't either. I saw someone else post about it, and I'll just say as a just my 2 cents, and this is me personally, Andy Moore, that especially in Oklahoma, I can't speak for other states, but here, listen, everyone who's working pretty much that's who can work, right? Like Oklahoma City just posted the lowest unemployment rates since like 2008, and that's like 3.3%. That's tremendous. So like working doesn't mean wealth. Is the other thing, right?
Right.
I deal with with a fairly indigent population as well in my job, and lots of our folks work, and many of them like barely survive. Working 40, 50 hours a week because their job doesn't pay a whole lot. Like they don't. It's not like they're living high on the hog. They just that's the way it is.
So check out that from OK Policy. All right, next up, the article from KGOU. This is so good, and it's really worth your time. Please read this. District Attorney hopeful challenges small-town politics in Altus. The thrust of this, Andy loves it whenever I use the word thrust.
It's the second time this episode.
He's giggling, and it's only had 2 glasses of whiskey. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. So the main point of this article is really looking at district attorneys and how much power district attorneys wield in the criminal justice system.
Oh, this is huge.
They are incredibly influential. There are 27 district attorneys in the state of Oklahoma. Do you know how many of them are facing an opponent for re-election this year?
26.
8.
That's it?
Yeah,
8.
Holy Moses.
Yeah. So 2/3 of district attorneys in Oklahoma are running without an opponent.
So attorneys in rural Oklahoma, prepare for 2020, 2022.
You know, pursuant to our discussion of judges, I wonder if there is a state statute that says you have to be an attorney to run for attorney general.
Oh, right, because you don't have to be an attorney to be a judge.
You don't have to be
I did know that.
You do not have to be a lawyer to be a judge.
Bananas.
So, I don't know that we have any in the
Not
state.
right now, but
Thank God.
Could. Any judge, yes, but
special judge.
They got a bunch of them in Texas.
Go figure.
Yeah, right. Don't even show me that tattoo. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Just so y'all know, Andy, Mr. Oklahoma out there, has a tattoo of the freaking state of Texas with a flag on his right
I was born in Texas.
deltoid. I don't even care.
Is that my deltoid?
That is your deltoid.
All right, then.
Yeah.
Shoulder to the rest of us.
get a second opinion on what that is. It's your pectoral.
This
It's your ulna.
This is your antecubital fossa right here, otherwise known as your
It's a hippocampus.
Your AC.
I see it.
your AC. Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
AC.
your AC.
So it's the inside of your elbow, your elbow pit.
It's the
I
elbow
just know it's
pit.
your
Yes.
antecubital fossa. I
That's
learned
true.
that.
That is true. But check out this article from KGOU. We'll link to it on the website. And it really talks about, it's specifically talking about challenges to sitting district attorneys in the context of substance abuse convictions, and how those can vary based on race, wealth, socioeconomic status, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely worth a read. Check it out. Lastly, I believe, right? Yes. Lastly, we've got an article from Brianna Bailey. I don't know why. Well, actually, that's appropriate. Do it again. Brianna Bailey from the Frontier is reporting that Oklahoma gave Boeing $90 million in incentive money, along with a few other tax breaks. Now, we have talked on the show before about tax incentives. We've talked about the Oklahoma Incentive Evaluation Commission that meets every year. Like this year, they recommended a repeal of
Film? No. Scott looks very upset. Listeners at home, I'm gonna just tell you what he's.
That's why you need video
I know.
and an edit button.
It's the one that they recommended repeal, and the legislator was like, "Nah, we're good."
Oh,
Capital gains deduction.
Yes, because we have no measured benefit from it, and it may have cost us several $100 million.
It costs us money. So they're
like, yeah, but I like it.
This is another. So
me
this is
feel
another
good.
example of a tax incentive. Now, I will say, full disclosure, the Oklahoma Incentive Evaluation Commission has said that this particular incentive is a worthwhile incentive that probably is a net benefit for the state. But Brianna does a fantastic job of really looking into how long Boeing has been in Oklahoma, how many jobs they've created, what the payout has been to the company, and I don't think I've read the article a couple of times, and I don't think that she's kind of making. I don't think she's making a statement of like, we've paid them too much, or it's not been worth it, or it hasn't been good.
No.
But it's interesting. It is interesting to have a kind of behind the scenes look of how these things work. Like, for instance, so Boeing will approach the government of Oklahoma and they'll say, hey, we're thinking about making this change in our corporate structure that would move this set of operations to Oklahoma, and it's going to bring a certain number of jobs. What can you do for us, right? And there's a certain incentive called the Quality Jobs Initiative where Boeing can actually get a cash payout from the state for bringing certain kinds of jobs to Oklahoma. And that's fine. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not
Because
saying
we
it's bad.
might see a net
Right.
gain from that. Right.
But like she finds out some interesting points. Like, for instance, they might negotiate where this agreement, is signed in, and this is a made up number, but like maybe the agreement is signed in August of 2018, but it's retroactive to August of 2015. Oh. Right? So Boeing may get paid for jobs that have been created over the last 3 years before the agreement was actually in effect. Or they may say, hey, you can't count these jobs, so like our baseline job number is 0. So you have to use, when you're calculating how many quote unquote jobs we've created, you have to use 0 as the starting point, not the 1,200 jobs that already existed or the 1,500 jobs that already existed.
Right.
And so it's just interesting to kind of see how. And one of the points that she makes is that the state agency that monitors and negotiates and enforces all of this has, shocking, had their budget cut drastically in the last 10 years.
So like everybody else.
Yeah. So there used to be like 25 people working there, and now there's literally like 3. So I don't,
they can't watch everything.
Right. So I'm just saying it's possible we may be getting the short end of the stick on occasion.
I can't speak to the retroactive part. I'm not really sure why that's there, but I will say, having just recently resigned from Boeing, that they are, again, this is anecdotal, they are desperate for people to come here and work because they are continuing to absorb.
You mean a lot of people don't want to move from Seattle to Oklahoma City?
And that's the problem. And they are raising starting salaries, mostly engineers, to get them to come here. And this kind of incentive money allows them to do that.
Right.
And they just went from, 2 years ago, 1,500 people, and now they're at 3,000 people. And maybe I have these numbers wrong, but I just saw their projections. I think they want 4,000 by 2020 and more after. And they are absorbing almost, I can't put a percentage on this, a huge amount of work from Seattle. And their hang up is getting people to move here.
Sure. And the thing is, we want that, like Oklahoma, like we want them here.
Yes.
We want these people here.
We want them paying taxes
We want
here.
these jobs here, right? So I think it's important to emphasize, like I said, that the article is not necessarily like a net negative, but Brianna said on Twitter, she's like, I got a wild hair and decided I was going to look at all of their applications, and it's just interesting. So it's at the Frontier, free. There's no paywall. So it's not super long, but it's longer than your average piece, but well researched, well written as always, and
Brianna's
really
a rock star on that
really
kind of
worth your
stuff.
time. Yeah.
So interesting. So Commander Downey, you said their projections are they would like to have 4,000 people here in Oklahoma ish. But that's,
I'm sorry, employees there, and that's an increase of 1,000 or 1,500 people.
So 1,000 new jobs in the next 2 years would be tremendous for Oklahoma, right?
Definitely.
That would be a huge
at least
deal.
Oklahoma City.
Right. Yeah. Also, again, I referenced this in our last episode, but Boomtown, if you haven't read it, just a book that just came out about Oklahoma City by Sam Anderson, is it resonating in my brain like every day with something like this, because we in Oklahoma City have this weird relationship with Seattle in all kinds of ways, from the Thunder to Boeing to all these things. Back, Melson, did you know this? Back in the 60s, we, Boeing, at the time, okay, let me back up. At the time, we believed that supersonic travel was going to be the wave of the future, right? Like this was going to be the new thing. The problem with supersonic travel, Commander Downing,
It's loud.
It's really effing loud because of sonic booms. And so they're like, yeah, but this will be normal. People will be okay with sonic booms several times a day. They just have to get
glass.
They have to just get used to it, right? Once they're conditioned, they'll be fine.
Plastic
so they
windows.
needed somewhere to test this. Who doesn't complain about things very often? Oklahoma City.
That's a fact.
And so they were like, okay, well, and so Oklahoma City, in our desperation to be relevant in this modern world, we said we would love to be the hub of supersonic travel for America. Come on down, Boeing. Move your high-paying jobs. So they came here. They started doing 2 booms a day, then 3 booms, then 4 booms, then 5 and 6. For 6 months, they built a huge new
Hence Boomtown.
Boomtown, right?
I get you.
So nice. Another.
Do the rim shot?
No, yeah. So another thing. So they built a big long runway out at Tinker, I think, to accommodate these supersonic jets, and they were just like rocking our city, I think 6 times a day or more for 6 months. And the people complained so loudly that it got shut down. And obviously, supersonic travel is not the wave of the future. But I just thought, what a crazy quintessential Oklahoma City story of like, we want to be cool in something. How about this thing? We'll sell our soul for this. Didn't work out, and so now we're gonna do something else. But
We're freaking cool.
we are cool. We're way cooler now than we were back in the '60s.
We got Russell Westbrook.
Just for now.
Yeah.
That's
No.
part of the book
I
too.
wouldn't bank on that.
Not
just for
forever.
now. He signed an extension.
Do you remember? This is the key point of the book. How much we loved Kevin Durant.
Who?
Kevin Durant.
Who?
I'm not sure.
Right.
Who you talking
Exactly.
about?
This is
Oh,
what
you
I'm
talking
saying. Both of you guys look at me like I don't. There's a fist bump occurring. Right. Exactly.
Kevin.
We thought he could do no wrong. Him and kissing his mama, and it was great.
I still
sold
don't know-
us out because listen,
I don't know who you're talking. I have. Why do I have no memory of this
He
guy?
just wasn't that into us.
Oh.
People acted
You
like
didn't give him enough retroactive incentives.
That's exactly right. People acted like he left us at the altar. I'm just
Hey, Kevin Durant. Just so you know, if you're listening,
We love you. Come
you're
back.
not invited on the pod. You're not invited.
You would turn him down. You wouldn't turn him down.
Kevin, if you're listening, you can come on the pod whatever you want.
but you should definitely first sign up to be a recurring donor on our website. Yeah, so here's the deal with the Boeing thing, just to get back on this, and we are having a very long episode.
Oh, yeah. How
So
many minutes are we at right
the
now?
total state
blame
Oklahoma
it on
budget.
me.
So the total budget of Oklahoma is like $22 billion, right? So $90 million is a not an insignificant amount of money, but a tiny portion of our overall state budget. It's
like 5%.
like 1/22nd of our entire state budget.
Hang on. 2.2 billion.
I was told there would be no
20%,
math.
$22 billion.
Hold on.
Oh, our total state budget is $22 billion. That
Yeah.
was 2. Oh, yeah. Okay, then yes, tiny percent. Yes. I thought you said 2.2 billion, and I was like, no, I think it's about
22.
I think it's about like 3%.
22B. $22 billion.
You learned something in that MBA.
So
Nice job.
Also
So-
from Ballotpedia.
so 0.3%.
Yes. A very tiny amount. All right. Are we on
I
to
learned
our...
how decimals work. Oh, dude, it's our last article. I don't know how you can say what it is.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a regular listener,
You know it's time.
we do.
Settle
we
in
have
there.
one this week.
Excited.
It's Pruitt Watch.
Commander Downey's very excited for this.
Pruitt Watch. So we've got an article from the Tulsa World. So the EPA's internal investigator, okay, their internal watchdog has said that Mr. Pruitt's $3.5 million in security costs were not justified and largely unnecessary.
His security costs, like his radio-proof phone booth or whatever he had.
Yeah, like that. Like the $749,000 that his security detail spent on travel for themselves.
And his $30,000 soundproof phone booth.
Yeah, his 18 bodyguards up from 6 for his predecessor.
He tripled the security detail.
Yeah, so do you know
But people were mean to him on the airplanes,
when
Kyle.
when he was
People were mean to me.
so
They
when,
spoke out. They're very angry.
I didn't even realize this when he was when he was called before the Senate to explain some of this. Do you know what he did to like defend his security spending?
Tell me you cried.
No, it's better. He read tweets.
What?
Yeah, like he got
Mean
on and like
tweets?
I did
read-
not
Jimmy
see
Kimmel
that
does
coming.
that, right?
Yeah. No,
Is
no.
that Jimmy Fallon?
It's Jimmy Fallon, yeah.
Reading
but
mean
no,
tweets.
So Scott Pruitt sat in the Senate and read
Like
mean
angry tweets from
tweets about himself to the Senate as justification for his. And then the senators asked him, "Did any of those result in arrests or physical harm?"
No, because he had $7 million worth of security.
Did you block them on Twitter?
Right. So
That costs a lot of money.
Blocking people on
Oh
Twitter?
yeah.
That's right. I had to pay someone to block my tweets.
So if you're looking for, if you're just looking to put a smile on your face, go to the Tulsa World. They do great work up there on many things. But this week, check out their article on Scott Pruitt and his $3.5 million in 16 months as EP administrator on security.
Well, that is sad. And that concludes Pruitt Watch for this week.
Makes it very difficult to be conservative. Makes it very, very difficult. It's
Commander Downey, you and I have discussed Scott Pruitt
yes.
a few times in class.
I prefer not, but
It is a difficult situation.
it's just indefensible. So much of what's gone on over the last 2 years is indefensible.
It's just goofy.
Yeah. I just want some adult leadership. Is that too much to ask? I think it might be too much to ask.
I don't know.
I know a guy, first name Joe, last name Biden, from Delaware.
I don't think Biden can pull it off. I mean, we don't get into national stuff very often, but I
You
don't.
have to recap his teeth.
New
We don't-
box
we
of
don't- we
chickens.
don't glow enough.
You don't think Joe can pull it off?
I think just like our news cycle has shortened, I think our popularity cycle has shortened for politicians on the national scale.
And our tolerance for that generation, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I said this before. I think for the Democrats, if one of the Castro brothers from down in Texas, if one of them rises up in the ranks, I don't understand why both parties aren't wholeheartedly pursuing the Latino vote. Jiminy Christmas.
the
Dems are. I think the Dems are.
They're talking about no, they're not. Like not enough. Why I have not heard a Latino's name in discussion on the national level
Since
lately.
Ted Cruz. But honestly, would you not take Ted Cruz right now over what we got?
No,
Since Jeb
no,
Bush?
I would not take Ted
I
Cruz.
had
Do you
this
want to know why?
discussion with a guy in Memphis just yesterday.
Do you know why? So
I would
here's
like to
why.
know why.
As a progressive, this is why I would not take Ted Cruz. Because Ted Cruz is... I can't even believe I have to say this where people are going to listen to it. Ted Cruz is so much smarter than Donald Trump.
Oh.
He would be so much more
That's the long game.
effective.
You're playing the long game. Yeah,
Right?
I get
So
it.
over the long term... Now, I will tell you, I was someone in 2016 who didn't think Trump could win. I underestimated
Same.
a lot of things. And I was glad that Donald Trump got the nomination instead of Ted Cruz. And I still think this is true. I thought that Ted Cruz would do more long-term damage to the country than Donald Trump was capable of. Now, I was not prepared for the attacks that Donald Trump has levied on our institutions. And I want to be really clear here. I don't know how many people we have that are conservative or Republican that listen. I hope we have a lot.
Millions.
You know, I would love for it to be millions.
Please donate.
I am talking about something irrespective of policy, right? You know, I think that President Trump has attacked fundamental institutions in a way that I did not anticipate. But I think that those institutions are holding.
Oh yeah.
And I think that they are. I think that they can recover. I think that Ted Cruz would have damaged the country in ways that are much harder to protect against, and that are much harder to recover from.
You say damaged. I would use a different word, but I understand your point. That they would have been done in a smarter, more logical way that is just more difficult to recover. It's different than just a midnight tweet from a. I just so badly want him.
Yes, that's.
I'm running. By the way, in 2020, I'm gonna go.
So let's.
Is that it for this episode?
That's it. First, let's end with a weekly question, which we did in the beginning, and I think if we do the beginning, no one remembers.
No, don't do the one I suggested. No,
I'm not. No, it's not about who's the best Scott. Here's the weekly question. I'm going to do the sound effect again because you were whining. The weekly question is: other than education, what is the most important issue for you this election cycle? Other than education, what is the most important issue for you this election cycle? Please respond to us. You can tweet at us at Let's Fix This Okay, or you can hit us up on email, podcast@letsfixthisok.org.
That's a really good question because education is dominating.
It's such a big deal, but other stuff matters. Is it criminal justice? Is it election reform? Is it tax reform? Is it any of these things? All right. Let's close this thing down. All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank God, finally. We finally made it. I'm proud of you guys. Well done. Dr. Melson's headed to the restroom. Don't forget to subscribe and rate Let's Pod This on Apple Podcasts and Spotify because, well, that helps other folks discover us and become better informed. Remember that you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This Okay. Scott is at SC Melson. Andy, am at AndyOKC. Our dear guest, Scott Downey, is not on Twitter because he's a wise man. But thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram at Let's Fix This Okay, and our website is is letsfixthisok.org. Sign up for our email newsletter. We're kind of in the off season. We're not sending a whole lot out, but coming up soon, we're going to have a lot of really exciting updates. Read the blog, find other resources about how you can get involved, and if you're feeling generous, make a donation to help support us because we do this for free right now, and it's wearing on both of us. Well, and the rest of our board as well. All right, our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and me, and Let's Pod This is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Check out the other podcasts with Mostly Harmless. The Wafty Show is relaunching this week as a talk show, and there's a lot of great podcasts as part of that. Our theme music is provided by the Sugar Free All Stars. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, non-profit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with their government in really meaningful ways. We want you to matter. We encourage you to get involved any way that you can. And remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week, everybody.